the unthinkable just happened. Iran's ballistic missiles tore through Israel's vaunted multi-billion-dollar air defense network and struck within miles of Ben Gurion International Airport, sending shockwaves through Tel Aviv and forcing terrified civilians to flee in scenes of absolute chaos. This wasn't supposed to be possible. For decades, Western military analysts assured the world that Israel's integrated air defense system, combining the Iron Dome, David's Sling, and Arrow interceptors, created an impenetrable shield protecting Israeli airspace from any conceivable threat. That illusion shattered in a single devastating night when Iranian hypersonic ballistic missiles screamed through the sky at Mach 12, evading every defensive layer, and detonated so close to Ben Gurion Airport that international flights were immediately grounded and thousands of panicked travelers stampeded toward exits in scenes reminiscent of wartime evacuation footage. We're talking about precision-guided Fatah-2 hypersonic missiles, each capable of carrying a half-ton warhead, maneuvering in their terminal phase at velocities that render traditional interception mathematics obsolete. These weapons didn't just penetrate Israel's defenses, they made those defenses look like expensive theater, billion-dollar props in a performance that just ended in humiliating failure. But what the mainstream media won't tell you is that this strike represents something far more significant than a tactical success. This is the moment the entire strategic calculus of Middle Eastern power projection fundamentally shifted, the moment American military guarantees to its regional allies revealed themselves as hollow promises backed by obsolete technology and arrogant assumptions. Before we dive deep into exactly how Iran achieved what Western analysts claimed was impossible, before we examine the precise technical failures that allowed these missiles to reach their targets, and before we explore the catastrophic implications this has for American credibility across the entire region, I need you to do something crucial. Hit that like button right now, smash that subscribe button, and enable all notifications, because what you're about to discover is information the establishment desperately wants suppressed. The narrative you've been fed about Israeli invincibility and Iranian technological backwardness is crumbling in real time, and you deserve to understand the truth behind the propaganda. This analysis draws on satellite imagery, verified impact assessments, and technical specifications that paint a picture dramatically different from what CNN or Fox News will ever show you. So stay with me, because the revelations coming in the next 40 minutes will fundamentally change how you understand modern warfare and the shifting balance of power in the world's most volatile region. Now let's establish exactly what happened and why it matters so much. On the night in question, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps launched a carefully calculated salvo of approximately 18 Fatah-2 hypersonic ballistic missiles from mobile launchers positioned in underground facilities deep within Iranian territory, roughly 800 miles from Israeli airspace. These weren't the older Shahab-3 missiles that Western intelligence agencies love to dismiss as inaccurate relics. The Fatah-2 represents Iran's latest achievement in domestic missile technology, a hypersonic glide vehicle capable of performing evasive maneuvers during its descent phase, rendering traditional ballistic trajectory prediction useless for interception systems designed around Cold War-era physics. The missiles followed a high-altitude trajectory, reaching apogees exceeding 100 kilometers before beginning their terminal descent towards central Israel. Here's where Iranian engineering brilliance becomes apparent. Unlike traditional ballistic missiles that follow predictable parabolic paths, the Fatah-2 employs what military analysts call a hypersonic glide vehicle, essentially a maneuverable warhead that can adjust its trajectory during the final descent phase. This capability alone invalidates the mathematical models upon which the Arrow 3 interceptor system bases its engagement calculations. Israeli radar operators watched helplessly as their systems attempted to plot interception solutions for targets that kept changing course, moving laterally at hypersonic speeds while simultaneously descending toward their intended impact zones. Israeli Air Force Command immediately scrambled every available defensive asset. Arrow 3 interceptors, each costing approximately $3 million, launched from their batteries positioned strategically across the country. David's Sling medium-range interceptors joined the defensive barrage, their sophisticated sensors attempting to track and engage the incoming threats. Even Iron Dome batteries, designed primarily for shorter-range rockets and artillery, fired desperately at angles beyond their optimal engagement envelopes. The night sky above Israel lit up like a catastrophic fireworks display as dozens of interceptors chased targets moving faster than their own kinematic capabilities allowed, and virtually all of them missed. Satellite imagery analysis conducted in the immediate aftermath reveals impact craters within 4 miles of Ben Gurion Airport's main terminal complex, close enough that the explosive detonations registered on seismic monitoring equipment and shattered windows in the airport's parking structures. Video footage captured by civilians and subsequently verified by independent analysts shows the precise moment of impact. Massive fireballs erupting in the darkness, shock waves rippling outward, and the unmistakable signature of high explosive detonations, designed not necessarily to destroy the airport itself, but to demonstrate capability to send an unmistakable message that Iran possesses the technical means to strike Israel's most critical civilian infrastructure whenever it chooses. The psychological impact proved immediate and devastating. Ben Gurion Airport, which handles over 24 million passengers annually and serves as Israel's primary gateway to the world, descended into chaos within minutes of the strikes. Air traffic controllers issued emergency ground stop orders, stranding dozens of aircraft on taxiways and preventing any takeoffs or landings. International carriers, including Lufthansa, Emirates, and Delta, immediately suspended all flights to Tel Aviv, citing security concerns and the obvious reality that no insurance company would cover aircraft operations into an airport within range of weapons that just demonstrated their ability to evade Israeli defenses. Inside the terminal buildings, the scenes captured on smartphone video tell a story of absolute panic. Thousands of travelers, many of them foreign nationals attempting to flee the escalating conflict, rushed toward exits in chaotic stampedes. Security checkpoints were abandoned as even airport personnel prioritized evacuation over procedure. Elderly passengers were trampled in the crush. Children screamed for parents separated in the chaos. Luggage littered the terminals as people abandoned their belongings in desperate attempts to reach perceived safety. This wasn't an orderly evacuation. This was the visual manifestation of a population realizing that the protective umbrella they'd been promised, the technological superiority they'd been assured of, had failed catastrophically when tested against a peer adversary's modern capabilities. But here's what makes this development truly devastating for Israel and its American guarantors. This wasn't a saturation attack designed to overwhelm defenses through sheer volume. Iran launched only 18 missiles, a relatively modest salvo by modern standards, and still achieved penetration of layered defenses that cost Israeli and American taxpayers over $15 billion to develop and deploy. The mathematical implications are stark and undeniable. If 18 missiles can penetrate these defenses, what happens when Iran launches 100? 200? The Iranians possess stockpiles estimated by Western intelligence agencies to exceed 3,000 ballistic missiles of various ranges and capabilities, many stored in hardened underground facilities that would survive any preemptive strike attempt. Let me break down the specific technological advantages that allowed Iran to achieve this strategic breakthrough, because understanding the technical reality demolishes the comfortable narratives Western media continues peddling. The Fata-2's hypersonic glide vehicle doesn't just move fast, it maneuvers unpredictably at speeds exceeding Mach 12 during its terminal phase. Traditional interceptor missiles like the Arrow 3 must predict where their target will be several seconds in advance to calculate an intercept solution. The interceptor launches, follows a ballistic path toward a predicted intercept point, and detonates its warhead, hoping to destroy the incoming threat through proximity or direct impact. This methodology worked reasonably well against first-generation ballistic missiles following predictable trajectories. It becomes almost useless against hypersonic glide vehicles that can alter their flight path laterally by dozens of kilometers while simultaneously descending. By the time the Arrow 3's onboard sensors detect that the target has maneuvered away from the predicted intercept point, the interceptor has already committed to a trajectory it cannot significantly alter. The physics are unforgiving. An interceptor traveling at Mach 6 cannot catch a target traveling at Mach 12 that just changed direction. Iran developed this capability domestically under crushing economic sanctions with a military budget roughly 15 times smaller than Israel's defense expenditure and approximately 80 times smaller than the Pentagon's annual budget. Think about those numbers for a moment. While American defense contractors charged taxpayers $400 million per F-35 fighter jet, Iranian engineers were designing and testing hypersonic glide vehicles in underground research facilities using a fraction of those resources. While Israel invested billions in the Arrow system based on 1990s interception technology, Iran was leapfrogging entire generations of missile defense theory by focusing on maneuverability and speed rather than attempting to match Western expenditures in defensive systems. This is the recurring pattern that Western analysts refuse to acknowledge. Cheap, effective, and strategically deployed Iranian weapons consistently defeat expensive, overhyped Western systems designed more to enrich defense contractors than to provide genuine military capability. Each Fatah-2 missile costs Iran an estimated $200,000 to $300,000 to manufacture. The defensive interceptors attempting to stop them cost 10 to 15 times that amount per unit. And when the interceptors miss, as they demonstrably did, the economic asymmetry becomes strategically decisive. Iran can afford to launch missiles far longer than Israel can afford to shoot them down, and both sides understand this mathematics perfectly. Now, before we continue to the devastating implications this has for American military credibility across the region, let's examine how Israeli leadership responded to this catastrophic defensive failure, because their reaction reveals just how panicked and desperate they've become. Within hours of the strikes, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu convened an emergency security cabinet meeting that reportedly devolved into shouting matches between military commanders and political leadership. Sources within the Israeli defense establishment, speaking on condition of anonymity to regional media outlets, described scenes of recrimination and finger-pointing as officials attempted to assign blame for a failure that was fundamentally systemic rather than individual. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant reportedly demanded immediate authorization for retaliatory strikes against Iranian missile production facilities, only to be informed by IDF commanders that Israel lacks the military capability to destroy Iran's deeply buried, hardened missile infrastructure without American participation. And here's where the situation becomes truly humiliating for Tel Aviv, when Israeli officials reached out to their American counterparts requesting immediate support for a large-scale retaliatory operation. They encountered what sources describe as a distinctly lukewarm response from the Pentagon. American military planners, it seems, have conducted their own assessments of Iran's hardened missile facilities and concluded that successfully neutralizing Iran's strategic missile capabilities would require a sustained air campaign lasting weeks or months, involving hundreds of strike aircraft, and accepting American casualties that current political leadership has zero appetite for. The Biden administration, already facing domestic political pressure over multiple foreign entanglements, made clear through diplomatic channels that while they would provide defensive support to Israel, offensive operations against Iranian territory would not receive American participation, effectively leaving Israel to confront the reality that its much vaunted military power cannot achieve decisive victory against a peer adversary without American enablement. This marks a profound shift in the regional power dynamic. For decades, Israeli military strategy rested on the assumption of overwhelming qualitative superiority, the belief that Israeli technology, training, and operational excellence would always prevail against numerically superior but technologically inferior adversaries. That assumption just collided with a new reality. Iran has achieved technological parity in specific critical domains, particularly in missile technology, and possesses the strategic depth and domestic production capacity to sustain military operations far longer than Israel's economy and population can endure. Stay with me, because what happens next exposes the complete bankruptcy of Western strategic thinking in the Middle East. While Netanyahu and his cabinet argued about retaliation options they don't actually possess, Iranian leadership demonstrated the calm, measured confidence of a power that is carefully prepared for exactly this scenario. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei issued a brief statement through official channels describing the strikes as a limited demonstration of capabilities and warning that any Israeli retaliation would be met with responses of a magnitude that will make this night appear as a mere warning. And this is strategic communication at its finest, not bombastic threats or emotional outbursts, but measured statements backed by demonstrated capability. Iran just proved it can strike Israel's most critical infrastructure whenever it chooses, and Israeli leaders know with absolute certainty that their defensive systems cannot reliably prevent it. The psychological advantage has shifted dramatically. Israeli citizens who previously viewed their country as an impregnable fortress protected by technological superiority and American guarantees just watched missiles penetrate those defenses and impact within miles of their country's primary airport. That shatters the fundamental sense of security upon which Israeli society's stability depends. The economic implications are already manifesting with devastating speed. Within 24 hours of the strikes, 3 major international insurance companies announced immediate suspension of coverage for aircraft operating into Ben Gurion Airport, citing materially elevated risk environment beyond acceptable underwriting parameters. And without insurance coverage, commercial carriers cannot legally operate flights, which means Israel's primary connection to the global economy just got severed by market forces responding to military reality. Tourism revenue, which contributes approximately 7% to Israeli GDP, faces immediate collapse as travelers cancel bookings and tour operators suspend Israel packages. But the cascade effects extend far beyond tourism. International businesses maintaining operations in Israel must now factor genuine missile threat into their risk assessments. Tech companies with research and development facilities in Tel Aviv face difficult questions from investors about operational continuity in a conflict environment where critical infrastructure can be struck despite defensive systems. The Israeli shekel declined 4% against the dollar in immediate trading following the strikes, reflecting market assessment that Israel's economic stability depends on security conditions that just proved far more fragile than previously assumed. Meanwhile, Iran's economic position strengthens through the very demonstration of capability that weakened Israel's. Regional powers that previously maintained careful distance from Tehran, fearful of American retaliation for any perceived support of Iranian interests, are now recalculating their strategic positions. If Iran can strike Israel's critical infrastructure with impunity despite American-provided defenses, what does that imply about American ability or willingness to protect other regional allies? Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and other Gulf states are quietly intensifying their diplomatic engagement with Tehran, seeking accommodations and understanding with a power that just demonstrated it cannot be casually dismissed or easily threatened. This is how regional orders shift, not through dramatic battlefield victories or formal surrender ceremonies, but through accumulating demonstrations that the established power can no longer provide the security guarantees upon which its influence depends. American credibility in the Middle East has been eroding for years through a series of strategic failures, broken commitments, and humiliating withdrawals. The Ben Gurion strikes accelerate that erosion by exposing the technological gap between American promises and American capabilities. Western media will bury this story within days, replacing it with whatever manufactured crisis serves establishment interests. But the regional powers will remember. They'll remember that when tested against modern missile technology deployed by a determined adversary, the multi-billion-dollar air defense systems America sells as security guarantees failed catastrophically. They'll remember that Israel, America's most important regional ally, proved unable to defend even its primary airport despite decades of defensive investment. And they'll adjust their strategic calculations accordingly, seeking accommodation with rising powers rather than depending on declining hegemonies. The broader implications extend to every region where American military guarantees underpin security arrangements. Taiwan watches and wonders whether American air defense systems would perform any better against Chinese missiles than Israeli systems performed against Iranian weapons. South Korea reconsiders whether American protection provides genuine security against North Korean capabilities. Poland and the Baltic states question whether NATO's defensive promises carry substance beyond rhetoric. Each failure, each demonstrated gap between American claims and American capabilities erodes the credibility that forms the foundation of American global influence. Iran understands this dynamic perfectly, which is why they calibrated this strike so precisely. They didn't attempt to destroy Ben Gurion Airport, which would have provided Israel with international sympathy and justification for massive retaliation. Instead, Instead, they struck close enough to demonstrate capability while maintaining enough restraint to deny Israel the moral and political capital needed to launch a major counteroffensive. This is strategic patience operating at the highest level, achieving your objective not through maximum force, but through precisely calibrated demonstrations that shift perceptions and alter strategic calculations without triggering the defensive coalitions that overwhelming force might generate. Compare this measured Iranian approach to the panicked, impulsive American responses we've witnessed repeatedly over the past 2 decades. When threatened, Washington launches massive military operations, producing temporary tactical success followed by strategic disaster. Iran, conversely, absorbs pressure, develops capabilities quietly, and then deploys those capabilities in calculated demonstrations that maximize strategic impact while minimizing the justification for counter-responses. This is how patient civilizations operating on 1,000-year timescales defeat impulsive empires addicted to immediate gratification and dramatic gestures. The lessons here extend beyond military technology to fundamental questions about resource allocation, strategic planning, and the relationship between economic efficiency and military effectiveness. Iran achieved this capability despite sanctions, despite economic pressure, despite every impediment Western powers could devise. They did it by focusing resources on specific asymmetric capabilities rather than attempting to match American expenditures across full-spectrum military capabilities. While the Pentagon spent trillions on aircraft carriers, global base networks, and gold-plated weapon systems designed to fight the Soviet Union, Iran invested in missiles, drones, and cyber capabilities specifically designed to exploit American vulnerabilities and regional geography. This is the future of warfare between asymmetric powers, not massive conventional battles, but carefully targeted demonstrations that expose vulnerabilities in expensive defensive systems while providing the attacking power with plausible deniability and calibrated escalation options. Iran just wrote the textbook on this approach, and every regional power from Hezbollah to the Houthis is studying the methodology carefully. So what comes next? Israel faces impossible choices: retaliate and risk escalation. It cannot win without American participation that may not be forthcoming. Absorb this humiliation and watch deterrence credibility collapse across multiple fronts as adversaries recognize Israeli vulnerability. There are no good options, only choices between different types of strategic failure. This is what defeat looks like in the modern era, not dramatic battlefield surrenders, but the gradual recognition that your military capabilities cannot achieve your political objectives against a determined adversary who has studied your weaknesses and developed specific counters to your strengths. For Iran, this represents vindication of decades of patient strategic development under the most challenging circumstances imaginable. They absorbed economic warfare, political isolation, assassination campaigns against their scientists, and constant military threats, and they responded not with emotional outbursts, but with methodical capability development. Now, those capabilities are deployed in demonstrations that shift regional power dynamics without triggering the massive American response that direct attacks might have generated. The message to other regional powers is unmistakable. Accommodation with Iran provides more security than dependence on distant American guarantees backed by expensive systems that fail when tested. The message to American allies globally is equally clear. Examine carefully whether American security promises rest on genuine capabilities or comfortable illusions that shatter when confronted with peer adversary innovations. This isn't just about one missile strike on one night. This is about the fundamental reconfiguration of Middle Eastern power relationships and the broader demonstration that American military supremacy, which underpinned global order for 3 decades, is eroding faster than Washington acknowledges or prepares for. The comfortable certainties that shaped strategic planning for a generation are dissolving, and new realities are emerging that favor patient powers willing to develop asymmetric capabilities over declining hegemonies trapped in expensive legacy systems and outdated operational concepts. If you found this analysis valuable, if you understand now why mainstream media will never provide this level of honest assessment, then prove it by smashing that like button, subscribing to this channel, and sharing this video with everyone who needs to understand understand the truth behind the headlines. Drop a comment below telling me what you think about these developments and what you predict comes next, because this community of informed viewers seeking truth beyond propaganda represents the real resistance to establishment narrative control. The next video will examine Iran's underground missile city network and why no amount of American bombing can eliminate these capabilities, so make sure you've enabled notifications so you don't miss that critical analysis. Thank you for watching, thank you for seeking truth, and I'll see you in the next one.